All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dids in the Dugout. I'm joined here by Peter Bartell. He's a SEC contributor for Fansided. I've kind of run into Peter, is a month or so ago. Me and Steven, we do our Twitter Spaces. He had hopped in there with us for a little bit, gave me a follow, and I started reading through some of his articles that he does for Fansided. He writes a bunch of SEC stuff, really good stuff. Y'all should end up going and checking that out. He's got some really good takes too, some really good stuff to read. So, Peter, first time me and you've seen each other face to face. Good to finally meet you, man. How you doing?
Good, man. Yeah, good to be here. Thank you for having me, and nice to officially meet you.
Yeah. No problem, man. This is kind of the time of year where everybody wants to hear football, right?
Yep.
I'm obviously a big football fan. I've had season tickets for 29 years for Ole Miss football. My dad took me and my brother for years and years and years growing up. I'm a huge baseball fan too. That was kind of the idea behind the show when it started. But I had the good
Yeah,
idea to start it during football season, so I need something else to talk about instead, right? So,
that's right.
yeah, kind of give people, a little idea of who you are, your background, and kind of how you got into college football.
Sure. Yeah. So, I live in Pensacola, Florida now. So ACC/SEC country. I actually have a goal to go to every SEC stadium, check them all out because they're semi within driving distance, right? Minus a few that I don't really care for,
Yeah,
anyways, that I will not mention.
yeah.
Um, but anyways, I'm from upstate New York, Rochester, New York, about an hour from Syracuse. So grew up as a kid going to Syracuse football games in the '90s, and if you remember, in the '90s, Syracuse is actually relevant. So we had Donovan McNabb, Marvin Harrison, Dwight Freeney, some more guys. Saw them all come through. Backstory to backstory, when Donovan McNabb was a freshman at Syracuse, Marvin Harrison was a senior and McNabb started his freshman year. So you can imagine how awesome that connection was. That was pre Peyton Harrison from the Colts, right? That people
Yeah.
really don't even know ever happened or was a thing. It was definitely a thing, and it was absolutely electric in Syracuse
Yeah,
on the
kind of ties
college
into
level too.
it too with Dwight Freeney playing on those Colts teams too, right? So
Dude,
kind of ties in
yeah.
there
So
too.
in that was the big talk in that game when Mike Vick, he was there at that same time. He came to Syracuse for Virginia Tech. And the big talk in that game, because Vick was getting Heisman hype, is like, is Freeney going to win the battle, or is Vick gonna, Vick was super athletic. Is he going to run around Freeney? Freeney sacked him 4 times that game. And then we've demised since. But with that, actually, that's that's how bad we are now, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. opted to
Yeah,
not go to Syracuse for obvious reasons you can see because he's showing out at Ohio State. But anyways, that's kind of my backstory. And then
yeah,
because of that, being from upstate New York, I went to a ton of games growing up for college football. Got hooked. I like the NFL too, but college is really where it's at. The culture and the passion you guys have is awesome. Specifically, the SEC
yeah.
is paralleled by absolutely none besides maybe English football.
Mhm.
And that's a hard maybe, right? But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It is. So cool. That's really interesting. Like I say, you don't see a lot of people from upstate New York be big college football fans. Especially these days, it's not as big up there, obviously, as it is down here in
right.
the South. Yeah. It's easy to get hooked when you actually get into it, though. Kind of like I said, the passion and all that. It's something that really takes a hold of you. So, but yeah, we're right here on the brink of week one right now. SEC being the premier conference in the country, and Ole Miss, they're one of those teams trying to take that jump to the next level, right? They had a couple good years here under Lane Kiffin to start his tenure, and now we've got an experienced quarterback back. We have, in my opinion, the best running back in the country, certainly one of the best two or three in the entire country, Quinshon Judkins. Just kind of what do you think? We'll start on the offensive side of the ball with Lane Kiffin being such a mastermind on that side and having these two experienced guys back. And I think we're going to have a really good offensive line. We're returning a lot of guys up front there, and we're looking for pieces in the transfer portal receiver to kind of come together, to kind of fill things out with receiver and tight end. But it always starts with quarterback and running back, right? So what is your thoughts on Jackson Dart and Quinshon Judkins?
Like we talked about before, Jackson's most likely and pretty much is the guy, right? I
Yeah,
think Jackson's going to be great. I mean, it's year 2 in this Lane Kiffin system, and he came from a different style at USC too, right? So you have to remember that. So I think he'll come in and really show out and be more comfortable than people think. And I don't buy into all this talk about like, well, he didn't have that many long balls, and it's sure he was more on the short game. Look, I don't buy into it at all. He's a D1 quarterback. He can throw. Okay.
yeah,
He may not have a Peyton Manning arm, but 99% of people don't anyways. A Joe
yeah,
Milton, right? 99%. And Joe Milton, I'd rather an accurate quarterback than a Joe Milton, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, and I think Jackson will be fine. I think he's the guy. I'm with Stephen Willis though, who you do the spaces with on his Locked On Ole Miss podcast. He talked about his speculating early on when Spencer Sanders, remember, came to Ole Miss, and then Walker Howard followed
Mm,
suit after, and then all of a sudden it became a 3-horse race, and Spencer's looking at that like, I'm not a sophomore like, well, redshirt
yeah,
freshman like Walker Howard, like, oh shoot, this is my only shot.
yeah,
And I was with Steven. I thought this guy's transferring as soon as if he becomes academically eligible per graduating to transfer as a grad transfer, he could do that again. The challenge would have been you got 2 weeks right in fall
right,
camp to make that transition. And obviously he hasn't done that, but I just want to raise my hand and say I thought that's what the guy was doing, and I was even speculating schools like Virginia and other schools that maybe a fit, but we'll see. That's the intriguing part though, right? Is like, does Kiffin go to QB system? I know he's openly spoke about, no, that's not a good thing. It's not what we want to do this year. That's not the solution. So I think with Jackson Dart, that'll be his job to lose, so to speak. And I think he keeps it iced up.
yeah, yeah. Kind of looking back on it now, like I was kind of under the impression, kind of like everybody else, when you see Kiffin bring in Spencer Sanders, Walker Howard, right? You've got this stacked quarterback room with an incumbent starter already on campus. That was only 19 years old when he played under you in year one. I was kind of under that thought too that Spencer Sanders would end up, once he
Yeah,
got actively eligible, would jump back in the portal, grad transfer out somewhere. Um, but kind of looking back on it now, it looks like Kiffin really was just trying to stack bodies in that room because uh, over the last couple of years, we've had some quarterback
that's right.
injuries without the
Yeah,
proper depth behind him. It's really hurt us down the stretch. Dart, even though he played all year for us last year, he was really, really banged up towards the end
right.
of the year, and we didn't have guys to come in for him. Uh, Even 2 years ago with Matt Corral, I mean the man was going out there basically on one leg trying to play quarterback in the SEC because we didn't have somebody in behind him that could come in and do an
Yep.
adequate job. So, but now we've got this really deep quarterback room. If that were to pop up again, you've got options there between Spencer Sanders and Walker Howard to come in and give Jackson a break if he needs to miss a game or two to nurse these nagging injuries, stuff like that. It's quite frankly, it's a luxury not a lot of teams in college
Yeah.
football have, and it's quite frankly a real testament to Lane Kiffin to build that kind of depth that you don't see in college football these days,
Yeah.
especially with the transfer portal, right?
That's just it. Transfer portal, and I think that's the other half of it. Is Kiffin? You have to look at succession planning, right? Like, some of these kids are going to transfer. It is what it is. You got to get them. I honestly, if knock on wood, Jackson can't stay healthy the whole season, I hope it's Walker Howard. I've never been a I blanked on the name. Trey Sanders, right? Yeah,
It's,
thank you.
yeah,
Um, I've never been a fan of his. If you watched his tape at Oklahoma State, because that's an intriguing team, right? I always think they're Gundy's always got him playing. He hadn't had him playing, and I think it's the QB's
and it
fault.
and it's such a different offense under Mike Gundy too, right? I
Yeah,
mean, that's just a completely different system than almost anybody in the entire country runs. It seems,
yep. And I
but
just Walker Howard was a 5-star recruit. I
Five-star,
mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Super talented kid coming out of high school. It was kind of the same thing at LSU. He was just behind, a couple really good guys there at LSU too. So he was kind of getting
right,
buried in depth a little bit too, behind Jaden Daniels, and then Nussmeyer, who's another 5-star, the same age as Walker Howard. So,
that's right.
yeah, he got out of there, come to Oxford. I think he's the quarterback of the future. We got another really
Yep.
good quarterback that reclassified from the 25 to the 23 class, as wild as that
Austin
sounds.
Simmons.
Yeah, Austin Simmons, who's apparently looked really good too.
And
So
you just
and
nailed
he's
another 4-star that
yeah,
committed,
yeah,
still
yeah,
in
yeah,
high school. See,
yeah.
Kiffin, that's what you said. The NIL, man, he knows. He's
One after another. So obviously, Ole Miss looking really good at that quarterback position, not only for the immediate but also for the future too. So that's all. That's obviously nice to see. Something else that I thought was really important for Kiffin as far as pickups go. You already got Quinshon Judkins there in the backfield, right? And he's one of the top running backs in the entire country. And then you have Riscano coming in. He's a 4-star running back out of Houston. You get Ulysses Bentley back. He was injured most year last year. And then he goes out and he gets Jam Griffin with like 3 weeks left in camp from Oregon State to transfer in. So he's stacking bodies at that running
that's
back
right.
position too. So what are your thoughts on Quinshon Judkins though coming in his freshman year last year?
I think it's a grind in the SEC, and I think what you said is what's going to set Judkins apart. Being able to spell him with
Yeah,
one of those 3 backs, maybe 2 of the 3, maybe all 3, right? Kind of rotating behind Judkins to keep him fresh, having that value in the room. So your RB1 can be your RB1 every time he's out there. If that means taking a play off every series or 2 so he can stay fresh, absolutely. And he should have the confidence to perform this year to easily get at least 1,000 yards. I know he's worked on his pass catching a lot too. And what I was most impressed about by him is he won the show at SEC Media Days for being the most well spoken, in my opinion.
yeah,
I
it was
mean, you
really.
see,
And you didn't see it a lot last year. You didn't speak a lot to media.
right?
Being a freshman and all. But I'm right there with you. When I saw him at SEC Media Days, I thought, holy
Yes.
cow, this kid's
And,
gonna be that superstar.
yeah. And you can talk about the yards and everything, but to me, everything starts with how you carry yourself. And
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that has any reflection of his grades, or I don't know any of that, like if he's been on honor roll or anything or dean's list, but you know, very well spoken guy. Obviously carries himself very well, which you would think would translate to the field.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
obviously does. Seeing his
yeah,
freshman year last year with 1,600 yards and all, kind of like you were talking about a second ago with keeping them fresh and all. It's also keeping them fresh later in games, right?
right.
Because if you the Ole Miss Alabama game last year, Zach Evans gets hurt there in the first
Yep.
or second quarter. Ulysses Bentley's already hurt; he's not playing. And even Lane Kiffin made the comment because we're driving, we got the ball in the air, with 20 seconds left to beat Alabama, and he talked about that last drive, how tough it was because he literally couldn't get his best player the ball because of how gassed Justin was by the time that drive came up because we had to ride him so hard to get to that point.
Yeah, it's definitely a grind, and I think he's going to be. I got feedback. Sorry. He's going to be good to go. What's funny, kind of off topic, is I think I heard on Stephen Willis's podcast. It might have been Locked on Alabama. I'm pretty sure it was Stevens. Pete Golding, when he came over,
Yeah.
um, he tipped off Kiffin. You know how Kiffin does the hands raise thing before the play? I guess he tipped off Kiffin that don't do that because people know and they just tell the DBs to back up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's funny to think about, but it sucks because that was kind of the trademark Kiffin, right? Like you knew something
yeah,
electric was gonna happen, but
yeah.
that's
You always kept your eyes on Kiffin on the sideline when the play
that's
was
right.
at him because he was sitting there reading the defense before the quarterback ever had the chance to do it himself, and he knew
Yeah,
exactly what was coming. So that's
yeah,
that's just also the kind of mind Lane Kiffin is, though, from an offensive standpoint. But I do think that what's going to tell the tale for the Ole Miss team this year is what's going to happen on the other side of the ball with Pete Golding coming in. That defense we have. I think it's 16 or 17 transfers coming in with Pete and Lane trying to basically completely rebuild that side of the ball through the transfer portal. And we do have a lot of good players coming back. But one of them that I'm really excited to see, I saw that you had wrote about him in one of your articles here lately. You were talking about the top freshmen basically for each team in the SEC, and and that's Suntarine Perkins, and that's a guy that I think Pete Golden's going to have a lot of fun with drawing up plays, trying to get him not only to the line of scrimmage, but he's a guy that can drop back and cover from that linebacker position too, or he can rush the passer. I think he can do a lot of different things with him. Just kind of what are your thoughts on Suntarine Perkins coming in this year as a freshman?
You said it. He can do a lot of different things. He played linebacker and running back in high school,
Mm-hmm.
in Raleigh, Mississippi,
Probably,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And won a state
Same high
title.
school as Dante Moncrief, same high school
Okay,
as yeah,
nice.
yeah,
Yeah, so he's versatile, and I think that's, I mean, that's staple for Kiffin, right? I mean, you can technically say that about any team. They all like versatile athletes, but truly, this kid's versatile, and I think those two positions in high school really complement well to mean like he doesn't mind being a bruiser, sticking his nose in there. Running
right.
back, linebacker. If you're talking like, well, running back, receiver, a
Mm-hmm.
receiver ain't sticking their nose in there that much, right? Running back, it's like you're plowing. Linebacker, you're
You're
plowing on the other side.
right.
So I think that versatility, and he was also invited. I Bleav he was an Under Armour All American, if I'm
Correct. Yeah,
correct.
you are.
Um, so it's a good get by Kiffin. Also, furthermore, on just the defense overall, I want to point this out because Golding didn't get a good rep at Alabama. They were basically like good riddance, see you later. Not happy, right? But mind you, when you go to Alabama, you um, you basically your hands are even tied halfway for the type of guy that you want to recruit in a way, and they're definitely tied for the system you're mainly going to play, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Um, but those two things have to mesh. You have to give your coordinators full control, not only in the recruiting side, but the play style. And it looked like the play style, Golding was able to do a little bit of what he wanted, but like dropping back into coverage and everything. But the recruits may have not lined up either because A, who was already there,
Mhm.
and B, who he was able to recruit and Saban maybe giving pushback because we've known that Golding is a great recruiter. That's
Yeah.
that's a thing in that NIL now not the NIL, the transfer portal, 17 guys you mentioned. I think that's telling, and that's a really positive sign for Ole Miss that Golding was able to go out and most likely Kiffin said, "Dude,
Go
get the
do it.
guys you want to get. We're changing DCs for a reason."
That's yeah, that's right. And that's what they did. They went out. They really put an emphasis on defensive back and linebacker. Those were the two positions they really went heavy on. I was talking to Steven a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, whatever it was, and I joked with him about how we're going to get all 90 defensive backs that we brought in on the field. You know how all these guys will get playing time because every
Yep.
time you look up, they're bringing in another corner or safety, one of the two, and they certainly have a type when it comes to safety. They want guys that can get out there and play on an island if they have to. If they need to bring extra guys and leave those safeties back there to cover guys, whether it be in the slot, tight end, something like that, get them to be able to guard them one on one, and also have guys big enough that can step up and play almost as a linebacker to help in that run game, which I know a lot of people are thinking, well, yeah, obviously you want people that can defend and play the run, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
ultimate goal, right?
No,
But
I get
that's
you.
I get you. Yeah, but that's the body type and athleticism that he really went out and quite frankly really improved this defense just from a paper standpoint. You see how it translates when we get into the season and start playing some games. So that's probably the thing I'm most excited about. See this defense, and you know, it's an answer we'll get pretty quick though, right? Because you look at Ole Miss's schedule, and it is absolutely brutal here to start things. We after we get through Mercer, we go to Tulane, which I feel like we should handle, but Tulane's a pretty good team. Then you get Georgia Tech, but then you get Alabama and Tuscaloosa. Then you get LSU and Oxford. All within your first 5 games. It's an absolutely brutal schedule and one that we've got to navigate. And but just kind of as a whole, how do you see the SEC shaping out this year? I was actually reading one of your playoff projections earlier today, and you had both Alabama and LSU in there. Is that right?
That's right. I
That's
know
right.
that's gonna have a lot of people do a triple take, but
Yeah.
so the scenario is right. LSU plays Florida State this
Hmm.
weekend. They win that game. And then I'm thinking that Georgia loses to Tennessee in Knoxville, and or Ole Miss. The predictions had, I think, them losing to UT, but I think Ole Miss is very doable too. If Ole Miss gets on a roll, watch
Oh yeah.
out. So I don't care where the game is, because Kiffin's kind of got that attitude and ego, not ego, swag. Definitely swag is the right word for it. Where it ain't gonna matter for that team where they're playing. They've been Tuscaloosa and played. You think
Yeah.
Georgia's anything to them? I mean, college atmospheres, Tuscaloosa is much tougher. Oxford's tougher than Georgia, in my opinion. Right?
Yeah.
Not that any are weak, but I mean, I'm just saying.
Outside of Nashville, of course.
Of course, Vandy with the construction project,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
But
That's right.
and no knock on them. That's a long project, and that actually gets me started, because people don't realize they have a lot of piping and stuff
Yeah.
under, and old plumbing under the stadium that was unanticipated. That's
Yeah. I'm
very
actually
old.
happy that they're going in and actually starting to do something, though. They've sit here and they've stockpiled check after check from the
Yep.
SEC to the point where people were starting to complain to the league offices about it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm glad they are doing something about it, and the renderings look incredible. It's gonna be a multi-sport
Yes. Yes.
venue for them, across four different sports, whatever it is. I think it's
Yep.
$3.1 billion campaign overall.
Yep.
So not to get on a Vandy tangent here, but
Yeah.
we will on there for
Yeah.
what they got going on. But yeah, just kind of they see kind of like you were talking about Alabama and LSU both in the
So,
college football playoff.
So yeah, then I have Bama beating their only loss coming to Texas A&M in College Station. We all know that game was super close in Alabama last year. I do have them beating LSU in Tuscaloosa, so that gives them, assuming they go 11-1, they win the West, right? So that puts them against Georgia, who I presume has one loss going into that game. Whether it be to Ole Miss or Knoxville. Ole Miss, I think, is self-explanatory, because Ole Miss is a great team. Even if it's in Georgia, if they get by that game, I think the thing is with that Tennessee team that's later in the season ish. It's in Knoxville, and even if it's a 3:30 game, because let's be honest, it ain't gonna be a noon game, right?
No.
Or an 11 Central. It's going to be a 3:30 or a night game, depending on records. Even if it's a 3:30, by halftime, because of time of year, it's nighttime anyway. So you're technically playing at night in Knoxville, right?
Yeah.
And I think that atmosphere, honestly, like Georgia will feel good going in, because at that point they'll be either having, let's just say they beat Ole Miss. They'll feel good, but they'll be kind of lulled into a false sense of security, like everything is at home, etc. Kentucky's probably their second biggest test, maybe South Carolina, and then they go to Knoxville, and it's like, bam. Yes, their argument is Carson Beck will be experienced by that point as their quarterback. He's never been a starting quarterback on the road in an SEC, but Jackson Dart went through it last year.
Yeah. You're going to have growing pains in this league, no doubt about it.
Yes. That's it. So on the back end, I think that I think that so then Bama faces off against Georgia, and Bama beats Georgia in the SEC title game. Georgia gets 2 losses. Then you're going to have a scenario where people absolutely want to see Georgia 3-peat, but with 2 losses, how do you justify that, right? You can't put them in. LSU's got 1 loss. That 1 loss is to Alabama, who's in. So on the surface, like if you think about it, yeah, it doesn't seem right. But mind you, it's happened before, where in the BCS era, we had 2 SEC teams in the national championship, and that was Alabama and LSU.
Yeah.
SEC West.
Yeah.
So, and there's people talking about Michigan and Ohio State being in, as 2 teams. Okay, well, that's 2 from the Big Ten. So I understand that they're the same division, but honestly, man, top to bottom, the West is just, you could pick anybody. We could be talking, you don't know who's going to take off. Really. You don't. It's like if you watch NASCAR, like Hendrick Motorsports, um, Roush Fenway, Keselowski, like all the teams, you don't know on any given day, any driver can win the Daytona 500, right? They're all going to have fast cars. That's how the West is this year, minus there's one team that's not elite. Mississippi State is an X factor. I can't even call them not elite.
Yeah, yeah, they're a really interesting team, I think, because they're bringing back, arguably the most experienced quarterback, and anytime you have that kind of experience at that position, it's something that you can't overlook, right?
That's right.
They've got a lot of continuity on that coaching staff too, with the unfortunate passing of Mike Leach, but then they just go and promote Zach Arnett, and you don't know how he's going to do as a head coach, but he's a guy that's been defense coordinator in this league. He was able to keep that team together through that really rough time they went through last year. But Will Rogers, he's a really good quarterback. They brought in that offensive coordinator from App State, who I absolutely love. I watched more App State over the last couple of years than I care to admit, and he's going to get back to running the ball a little bit. He's not going to get away from throwing the ball downfield. He's going to let Will Rogers do his thing back there, but he's going to have more of an emphasis on running the ball and being a more balanced offense, which kind of makes it a little more scary if they can keep things going a little bit. And then you've got Auburn there too, right?
That's right.
Hugh Freeze in his first year, he's all about first year magic. His first year at Ole Miss did not have a very talented team. I think they were actually on record as saying they had 2.5 SEC players on that entire roster. And then he goes out and goes 6-6, goes to the Birmingham Bowl and wins it too. And that was just, rocket ship attached to his ass, and they took off at that point, started recruiting at an incredible level, and really took off then. So you can't discount Hugh Freeze in year one. I've seen it firsthand, and I'm not going to be the one to count them out either. So, but kind of like you said, though, the West is absolutely loaded. You got A&M with all of that talent. If Jimbo can kind of get out of the way and let Bobby do his thing, I think they have a really good quarterback in Connor Wegman. I think Bobby Petrino can do really, really good things with him back there. And then over at Arkansas, you've got, it's possibly the best quarterback running back tandem in the entire country with KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders. They're kind of going through the same thing defensively as Ole Miss has, brought in a lot of transfers defensively, trying to rework that side of the ball. But again, two biggest positions on the field offensively, and they've got two guys that's played a heck of a lot of college football there. So top to bottom, SEC West going to be an absolute bear this year. I'm really excited to see it. Can't wait to see it, and just kind of see how it all plays out, because you can, people talk about Alabama winning the West, LSU winning the West, and then what do you do there at 3, 4, 5 between Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and then whatever you do with Arkansas, Auburn, Mississippi State. I think it's going to be incredibly fascinating how it all plays out this year.
I've been going to your point, team by team in the West, and doing game by game predictions, and I have a lot of teams with 1 or 2 losses, because it's just such an even playing field. And I think I know it speaks to the coaching. If you think about 10 years ago, the head coaches, I'll name a few in the SEC West compared to now. And Orgeron may have been more than 10 years ago for you guys, but
he absolutely was. You got to go back like 2005 or 6 is when we hired him, and then he was out by 2008, I believe.
And then you had Freeze, and then you had Luke, like interim, and then permanent hire, right? So kind of set back. And now Kiffin's an elevation from that. We can agree on. Les Miles was at LSU, right? And then at Orgeron, now Brian Kelly. Sam Pittman, you can call a weak link, and he's not. And I hate it. Yeah, and I hate it for Mississippi State, but Mike Leach was there. He was getting things on track. And he's still got the players there. You got Saban at Alabama. Now you got Freeze at Auburn, like you said. It's just the elevation, I think, in coaching across that side of the division has got things to where, okay, yeah, that's why this team is going to lose. That's why this team's not going to lose. And to touch on a few teams specifically in points, you mentioned Ole Miss. They have 27. I saw returning on their two deeps.
Yeah.
You talked about experience. That's crazy. Now I will talk poorly about Ole Miss, or sorry, Mississippi State. I'm gonna talk poorly about Mississippi State to keep your
Yeah, I like
listeners.
that. Yeah.
But yeah, I questioned it when it happened because we know what kind of guys were in the building for Mike Leach. We know what kind of offense he ran, and you're going to hire a defensive minded head coach off of that. I understand more balance, like you said, but it makes you question and wonder. Like, his emphasis was never on defense. And I'm not saying you want to stick to that style, but
Hmm.
this is, and mind you, that they pointed it out on Lockdown Alabama, that Luke Robinson did, that Zach Arnett didn't have any other head coaching offers. Nobody was knocking on his door saying, I want you to be DC at Michigan, or I want you to be DC at Ohio State, or whatever, head coach at, another school.
Hmm.
Nobody was knocking on his door, or he would have been gone.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's definitely a crapshoot with Zach Arnett down there, and maybe it works out, and maybe it doesn't. Who knows?
maybe.
Uh, Obviously, a tough situation for them, having to kind of try to keep things together after Coach Leake's passing. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't change the fact though that Arnett didn't have people beating on his door trying to get them to come to other Power Five schools at that point. So yeah,
But
it's be such a fascinating year though.
yeah, Wegman too. I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
You're spot on with him. And he was officially named the starter. Surprised by Jimbo, like what, yesterday, 2 days ago. I think yesterday, but 896 yards last year in his 4 starts and 8 touchdowns, 0 picks. One of those came within a whisker. His first start of beating Bama in Tuscaloosa. Watch out for that kid.
Yeah,
He's
yeah, I was so impressed with him last year when we played him. That was when they had made that move when they ended up playing us, and I thought he was absolutely incredible, especially for a freshman. On top of
yep,
that, too,
yep.
the way he was able to handle those moments.
Arkansas has two, that duo, like you talked about. Also, Luke Haas, and he has a brother too. I forget his brother's name. They're two tight ends that were actually recruited for Arkansas, coming in from Oklahoma. And
Yeah,
this Haas kid apparently has been showing out on camp. He's a tight end. I know they got another one transfer from North Texas who's like the number one, but Haas is competing for or has locked up that number two tight end spot. And the way they're talking, it's like the second coming of Hunter Henry. Which, if it is, I loved Hunter Henry. That was a player. So watch out for this Haas kid, and then LSU year two at Brian Kelly. Man, I mean,
there can be a problem.
he's won every. People just want to look at his Notre Dame and think about it. And I wrote an article on him too, and how he's underrated. But he was at Notre Dame for like 10 years, so I understand that's what people want to look at and pick at. He won before that at Grand Valley State, which was a D2. He won national titles there. Then he went to Central Michigan and won years to like an 11-win team. Um, he then went to Cincinnati and did the same thing. That's how he got his job at Notre Dame. And then Notre Dame's success is how he got his job at LSU. Furthermore, with him, think about all the programs that have played a Nick Saban led Alabama team that have deteriorated after playing them as far as non conference opponents. Wisconsin, Penn State, West Virginia, Florida State, just to name a few.
Yeah, yeah,
Michigan has not. They've come back under Harbaugh, and Notre Dame did twice. They got shellacked twice in national title games, right?
yep.
If you
But
remember that Eddie Lacy game, and then more recently. But Kelly came back off of that both times and got that program. That's saying something. And he did it with um, stiffer academic standards than any other school,
yeah,
pretty much at Notre Dame. And I'm telling you, he raised the academic standards at LSU, to be fair as well. But nobody, I'm not knocking LSU. Nobody is Notre Dame standards. And watch out. I don't think that people realize, or any of us know truly, how good of a coach he is. He may not be better than what he's showing right now, but I think he is. And that's the intriguing thing.
yeah. There were two times here within the last decade that Ole Miss has played a team and their coach was in the first year with that said team. and I said, okay, you better get them now because this guy's going. It's about to get them rolling. That's when Kirby Smart took over Georgia. They came into Oxford, and Hugh Freeze just absolutely
Yeah.
whipped. Yeah. But I said, you better get Georgia now because Kirby Smart's about to get that thing rolling. He has. I said the same thing last year about Brian Kelly because, just like you said, he wins everywhere he goes, right? And the point with Notre Dame and academic standards is something that's not brought up enough, that he's able to get those kind of athletes compete at the level he was able to compete at with those high academic standards.
That's right.
He's a football coach, and now you get him down on the bayou, and he's going to be able to get basically anybody he wants to down there. And you pair that with his football knowledge and the way he's able to coach these guys up, and he's going to be a real problem in the West. So it's definitely going to be something to see over the next few years.
And let's be honest, recruiting at South Bend in 1980 is a lot easier than it is to recruit a kid, even if they got the grades in 2022. Yeah. They want to be on the bayou. They want to be in the Grove at Ole Miss, right? They want to be in Florida at a Florida State or Florida.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
Not the same. You're absolutely right. So, well, Pete, look, man, I've kept you a little longer than I anticipated, and I told you I would. I sure appreciate you coming on. But before we get out of here, why don't you tell people how they can find your articles?
Yeah, you can. The easiest way to do it, go to my Twitter profile, Pigskin Petey, and I have a link right on the profile for my author page. The website I write for is for Fansided, Southbound and Down, and it covers the whole SEC. I got a lot of stuff up there. When I did an article, I think on Ole Miss's record. Maybe not yet. That might be coming out. I actually did a recent one just as an example on Georgia's tight end room and how I think Brock Bowers may not be the leading pass catcher this year just because he's going to be double teamed all year. So stuff like that, kind of fun stuff, hot take stuff to think about. So that's how you can reach me. But I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man. Like I said, appreciate you come on, and you're obviously very knowledgeable about the SEC as a whole. So I'm sure I'll be reaching out to you again though as the season goes on, see if I can get you back on here once we kind of see what the landscape looks like a little bit.
All right, dude. Toddy to everybody.
All right, appreciate
you guys.
Bud.